Would you would you tell me a bit about how you got into music? Like, what was the your earliest memories of hearing music or playing music or anything like that?
Uh, I was very lucky with my junior school.
Okay.
Uh, I went to school in Walthamstow in at Henry Maynard Junior School, which at that time would have been the 1950s, I suppose. Had a specialist music teacher called Dennis Carney, um, and he was one of those people who was able to infuse people um, into a love, basically, of classical music. Actually, so he kind of got virtually the whole school into it in some way or the other, either through choir or recorders and things. And the first thing I did when I started learning the recorder was to change the notes around. So I decided I quite liked the idea of being a composer at a very early age. And then that was encouraged. So I took piano lessons, then went to the local grammar school. This was before the comprehensive school age. But again, it was a school with a considerable musical enthusiasm. I had a choir and everybody around was interested in music. It was very diverse, actually. So you'd have, people, the same people would just sort of go to the see blues concerts at the Cook's Ferry Inn and at the same time be listening to Janacek string quartet. So it was pretty diverse. And we played in various sort of bands and ensembles. I had one mate who was really into medieval music, which was a
Okay.
complete closed book to me at the time. So we used to form sort of bands that played medieval music. One of my schoolmates was who is now the distinguished academic Christopher Page, and we used to play in a medieval music group together. In fact, one of the pieces of music that is used in the Wicker Man, the Myriads section, is actually derived from stuff that we used to play at school.
Oh, no way. Okay. Um, and did you which college did you study at? Was that the one in London, the Royal College, or did you study one the Northern? I can't. I
I studied at the one in London,
in
the
London.
Royal
Okay.
College.
And you studied, that was obviously mainly focused on classical music, was it?
Yeah,
Yeah. And what was were you from the recorder, did you go on to like the piano, or was there
yeah,
what, yeah, you went piano. And
yeah.
did you
No,
then
I mean the recorder was like the gateway drug
yeah. It got you started on the
on
musical.
the
Yeah.
downward path to the crack cocaine of composition.
And when you started to first kind of compose music, what kind of, were you trying to compose classical music, or
Yeah,
were you, yeah, you were,
I
and
wasn't
and
trying. That's what I was doing.
yeah, yeah, and were you who were your inspirations classically? Like, what composers did you
Oh,
most?
I don't know. Composers at the time be like, I don't know, Ligeti, quite sort of hardcore. But
Okay,
I remember at the same time I was also playing in folk bands,
okay,
and we had a folk rock band called Hocket, which actually again was the germ, if you like, of the band that ended up playing on the Wicker Man.
yeah,
Basically, it was the combination of I mean, I used to pay for my way through college playing in Irish folk bands, actually. Um, well, actually, English and Irish, depending upon who was paying the bill. Um, so basically, I'd already got considerable knowledge, practical knowledge, not theoretical knowledge, of a lot of folk music. And we started this band Hocket, which was a lot of folk rock band in the sort of the work, I don't know, sort of like, I don't know, what would you call it? A Fairport Convention knockoff, Steel Eye
yeah,
Stand, maybe, probably closer.
yeah,
Um, but the fact that I'd also had a sort of pretty rigorous classical training was what enabled me both actually to provide the folky element vibe of the Wicker Man, but also the technical business that required, for the orchestrations and the instrumentations of things like the procession, the summers are coming in, and all that sort of stuff.
yeah.
Fairly, I mean, I suppose at the time I was probably quite handy in the sense that I crossed two streams.
Yeah. And do you come from music from um because I played music. I played classical music since I played the cello and I played the piano, and now I play the guitar a lot, and I do kind of more like folk recordings now,
Yeah,
that kind of things. But do you come from music from a kind of, do you think, more theoretical viewpoint? Are you thinking about the kind of the chord patterns, the progressions, or are you more just sort of composing out of listening with your ear and just sort of trying to figure it out melodically through your head?
it's always a combination of technique and intuition.
Okay, yeah.
So
You,
I'm aware of the technique, but I don't I think the whole, I mean, if you were talking to me as a composition teacher, I'd say that the actual thing is that you need to balance the technique and the intuition a lot.
yeah, yeah,
And that in fact, there's always a risk that one will overtake the other.
yeah,
And the ideal is to place them into an interactive collaboration between the two parts, if you see what I mean.
yeah. And are you able to? One thing I know the theory quite, because I studied classical music like theory, but I struggle with the kind of like, can you if you're playing a chord or you're composing something, are you aware of all of the key, which chord is in the key and everything? You're able to do, yeah, you're fully,
Yeah,
yeah,
not only whether it is, but also whether it isn't.
yeah, okay. Because that's very, I struggle a lot with that. I find that to be very, like, I'm very slow with that. I'm a lot more, I'll rely a lot more on my ear. I don't know why. I just kind of like, if it sounds right or something
Well,
like
that's
that.
what, yeah, well, that's what Paul Giovanni did.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, which actually worked. Well, I mean, it self-evidently worked extremely well. It
yeah,
works not for, I mean, it's the way that it goes. I mean, my job, if you like, is just to sort of add the gold dust, the stardust, if you like.
yeah, yeah,
You know, things like in corn rigs, there's a bit,
yeah,
for example, where the violin goes.
oh yeah,
Well, the fact that the recorder goes up the other way, that's the thing you do theoretically. You know, the recorder answers it by going da 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 da, which is a retrograde. No, it's
yeah,
not. It's an inversion. So
yeah,
sometimes get the names wrong, but it's an inversion. But it's the kind of thing you think of if you've got a classical training, but you might not necessarily do if you're working entirely by ear. But if
yeah,
it doesn't work when it works, when you put it together, you might as well give it back, give up, and go home.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And how did you were a student at the time, weren't you? When the Wicker
Yeah,
Man?
no, I wasn't. No, that's a kind of like, I think that's an Alan Brown mythology thing. I mean, he made up a lot of that stuff as he went along. No, I just graduated.
Okay.
And the reason they wanted to get students because they thought it would be cheap.
Yeah,
But it was the time required in order to do the film was such that it was deemed that it would detract from a student's course. So they looked instead for recent graduates. And my composition teacher, who was John Lambert, sensed that I might be the right person for the job. So he put me forward, and I went and did a kind of interview, I suppose, audition stroke sort of thing with Paul Giovanni. I
okay,
mean, I think you have to sort of bear in mind that the turnaround from giving the green light and starting shooting was extremely quick. I
yeah,
mean, you know, there wasn't like sort of 6 months planning or anything like that. It was like, we want to use this money up because we're closing British Line down. If we don't spend it, it will just go into a pot. So make the film that's near sitting here on the stocks. So it was actually, as I say, it was turned. So I don't think he could afford to have been that fussy thinking about it.
yeah. And so he did Paul Giovanni, did he compose, did he write some of the
So,
songs? And then you added the kind of orchestral and or the
yeah,
element, that was
yeah,
the dynamic, was it?
basically yes,
Yeah.
the incidental, but all the music that I added to it were basically any incidental music that is there uses all of Paul's source material or folk music.
Yeah.
There are a couple of originals. The Chop Chop is mine, and the Myriads arrangement is all mine. But other than that, it's just all basically utilizing Paul's material. Certain things like combining Summer is a Coming In was always going to be there, whether it was always intended to combine it with the processional march, I don't know. But I've always been quite pleased with that.
I mean, I think I don't, did you draw a lot on? You said you were in folk bands and Steel Ice Band, Fairport Convention, like Pentangle, those kind of groups. Were they influences on it, or were you just going from your own?
Well, yeah, I mean, Pentangle were. I think Paul originally wanted to use Pentangle, but that was extremely expensive, so
Yeah.
wasn't able to do so. Although he does use the processional, actually is a folk song that is recorded by Pentangle.
Oh, okay.
But for me, from an arranger point of view, I'd say probably the closer influence was a band called Comus.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard. I haven't listened, but I've heard of them. Yeah. Because I think from I've watched them. I've watched the film probably about 20 or 30 times, and I absolutely love it. And the soundtrack, I absolutely love it as well. I mean, I play Gently Johnny. I play about I think it's just a fantastic guitar riff. It's so simple, but it's just amazing. And so much of the music is like that first. Did you compose the first? The first scene when the airplane's coming in and it's like a mixture. I think I'm not sure what instrument it is. Definitely woodwind.
It's a bagpipe.
Bagpipe. Okay, yeah.
They're either Ulan pipes or Northumbrian pipes. I can't honestly remember which it is. They're not Scottish though. I know that.
And it kind of has the Gently Johnny riff within it. Is that or is that?
Wait, no, hang on. You're thinking of the opening titles music.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
With the bagpipe and Leslie Mackey singing the lament.
Yeah.
Now that's a traditional folk song.
It's a traditional folk song, is it? Okay.
Basically, all you do is you just play it. It's just sung on, then played over. But first of all, it's played by the bagpipe, and then she sings it.
Yeah.
There was no arranging to be done on that one, really.
Yeah.
Except getting into the studio and do it.
And with the studio, so you said it was quite rushed. So like, how long did you have in the studio to produce the soundtrack? Like, what was the time frame?
I don't know. I suppose the first thing we did was the orchestral stuff, the processional. First session of that was a disaster, so we had to redo it. I'm amazed I didn't get booted out actually. But anyway, so we redid it again, but with better musicians. And the songs were done, I think, over the space of 2 weeks, something like that.
Wow. Okay.
I tell you the truth, I didn't keep a diary, so I can't tell you exactly. Certain things were done. Most of the recording was done at what was then Delane Lee in Wembley, that then became CTS in Wembley and now doesn't exist. The Fire Leap, that was recorded in Marble Arch at the Pye Studios, which coincidentally is the studios that Comus used to record in, but I didn't know that. And some stuff obviously was recorded after the film. There was some post stuff that needed doing. For example, the chase music, the search music, the going through the cave. Most of the incidental, most of the non-diegetic music was actually done post the event.
And like, what was there any kind of was there talk about the sound that you wanted, that Paul wanted to achieve? Was there, or did it just sort of organically happen? Like, was it?
No, the idea was simply to use only instruments that could be portable.
Okay, right.
In other words, that the instrumentalists, because as you know, all the instrumentalists that did the soundtrack are also the instrumentalists on screen.
Yeah.
Basically, I mean, there's a couple of mine, bit of sort of sprucing up needed to be done in certain areas, but just basically everybody you see playing instruments on the screen are the people who did the recording, and he wanted to make sure that it was the kind of instruments that you could carry around wherever you went. So in other words, you could sit on a wall in the Maypole and you could play there, or you could be in the pub. The only time you have a piano, of course, is in Lord Summerall's, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
The only diversion was using the electric instruments in the cave sequence. I think it's probably because it was in a cave, so we needed rock. I can't imagine any other reason. Oh, other than the fact that Paul was getting really pissed off with Robin Hardy at that particular point, and I think he allowed it to go because he knew Robin didn't want any electronic instruments.
So what about the kind of to me the sound of the music is almost like it's sort of timeless. Like I don't know how you achieve that in a recording scenario. Was there a kind of was there a discussion about the process that you wanted to use for recording? Was there a particular style that or effects that you were using to capture that kind of I personally think a timeless kind of quality?
Well, I mean, the production level, I mean, Paul did the production, basically.
Yeah.
We all learned a lot from his procedure, but one of the particular techniques, there are two techniques that he was keen to exploit that have now become common practice, but were less so at the time. One of which was actually almost no voice projection into the microphone. Everything was close recorded and done at very, very low levels. So basically the singers had to he didn't want any projection in the singing. He wanted it to be quite sort of quite laid back. So it was very close mic'd. The other thing that he was keen on was not eliminating peripheral noise. You know, for example, there was a lot of people used to go to a lot of trouble not to actually hear the fingers moving on the fretboard of a guitar. He liked that. He liked to have the ambient sound of the instrument. So again, they were also close mic'd in such a, whereas there might have been a degree of distance, so you couldn't hear the fretboard action at all. He liked, again, the guitar to be pretty close mic'd so that you could hear everything. And that's, I think, probably what gives it its timeless quality.
Yeah.
It's very 21st century production, but it's almost the sort of production values that you would utilize in a digital world rather than a pre-digital world.
So you mean just the process of recording was ahead of the time, do you think, or was it?
I think a lot of his thinking was ahead of the time. Yeah.
Like when you saw the content of the kind of lyrics and the ideas behind it at the time, were you taken aback by it? Was it really new to you? Did you think this is a bit weird, or what did you think about that?
I didn't. I mean, I don't think I reacted to it in that way. I mean, to me, it was. I just did what I was told, if you know what I mean. I mean, I got the material and then worked it best I could, in keeping with Paul's vision for it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not to say, when I say you do as you're told, what I mean is there was loads of creative input, and not just from me. I mean, we all sort of were making decisions, but various sorts of, what would you say? Adding the glitter dust to it a bit, I don't know, bronzing it up, polishing it. I mean, just doing stuff. I mean, remember what Paul did was sing and play the guitar. So, and he sang little bits that he wanted included, all of which was absolutely fine. He was very good at things like on the spot, backing vocals and things like that. He could sort of conjure those up for, you know, we'd get loads of people in to sing the backing vocals, for example, on Gently Johnny. You just do them until he got the kind of sound that he really wanted to hear. It was very good, actually, the way that he put that together. There was no written material for the backing vocals on Gently Johnny, for example. That was all basically so-called head arranging.
And did you find the experience to be formative in terms of what you went, your composing career? Later, did you learn a lot from his way about going about things, or did you learn a lot about your own composing through the experience?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you learn a lot about how to work on the basis of because it's just working in a different way. You're working in a studio and you're working with sound purely. I mean, you're not actually analyzing things down in a technical way in quite the same way, certainly with dealing with the songs. So it gets technical when you're dealing with some of the incidental music. And I mean, actually, one of the things that we've been talking about is whether we should, in fact, be doing performing any of the music with the people who are left. But I've been working with well, one of the things that we discovered early on. We've been talking about for years about actually doing some of the music live again, and we're coming up to the 50th anniversary. There was one project that, in fact, in the end, we weren't so keen on getting involved in, but we realised a couple of years ago that Andy Tompkins, the guitarist, didn't really want to do any live shows. So, and Paul Giovanni's long dead.
Yeah.
So I started working with the singer Matt Dayton.
Okay.
Because he can play all the guitar riffs, and he's a big Wicker Man fan, and he can sing the songs, and he's got a following all of his own anyway, which is quite substantial. So the idea or the plan, at least intentionally, the intention is at some point to do the concert with, or a performance or something with Matt being, as it were, our Paul Giovanni, with the original violinist Ian Cutler, and with Leslie Mackey, who's always keen to do some of the Wicker Man things.
That's that's this year, isn't it? It's the 7/23, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the 50th anniversary. Whether it'll ever come to anything, I don't know. But we need to flesh it out, and Matt and I are writing new material to go with it. So anyway, that's the plan for the future, possibly.
Were you surprised at how much it's, how popular it's become? When you got involved, did you think that it was going to be something big?
No, nobody thought it would be the cult success. I think that's historical anyway. The reason it's become a big cult success is because of circumstance, actually. I think if it had had a sort of proper release at the time, it would have probably gone the way of something like The Devil Rides Out. I mean, it would have been sort of very much one of those films that sort of came and went with a certain amount of aficionados. I think the legend, the mythology that hangs behind the Wicker Man, of its attempt to suppress it, the lost footage, Christopher Lee's advocacy for the film, all of those things came in the end to create, rather like, it has the kind of cult status in the way of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which, as you know, was always being shown as a late night cinema event.
Yeah.
Well, the reason that the Wicker Man kicked off was because it kept being played on a Friday or Saturday night late show in Boston, and its reputation kind of grew because it was like Rocky Horror Show is a regular weekly feature of a late night show, I think, in a Boston cinema. And then it gradually kind of, the mythology about the suppression, as I say, it just generated its own. I think also the fact that it is actually both a horror film and a procedural investigative film and a musical all at the same time. So it's got three entirely different threads running through it, which is actually almost by definition of what makes a cult film.
Yeah,
I think, generally speaking, when nobody thought that it would be anything other than a pot boiler that would disappear into the mists of time.
Yeah,
I think everybody sort of since then has been quite surprised at its. I mean, I'll tell you what. I mean, give you an example. I mean, apart from the fact that you have things like League of Gentlemen referencing it all the time, and Shallow Grave, I think, references. So it started cropping up as a reference elsewhere. I mean, there's a Disney Plus series at the moment called Little Demon, which is a Danny DeVito production. It only gets to episode 2 before it makes a Wicker Man reference.
Yeah, it's funny how I came at it from a completely different, maybe because I'm 24, so I wasn't, I don't know, I wasn't born at the time, or I wasn't lived through it, that I came at it from I heard Willow's song first. I heard that, I think it was on Spotify, and I heard it, and I just was like, when I heard it, it just has a particular sound. I don't know how exactly to describe it, but it just, the the music in general has a particular sound, and I just thought, okay, wherever
Yeah,
this.
I'll tell you something. Paul's harmonic thinking was very, very interesting indeed.
And did he come? Did he come from a folk background? Did he come from a
No, I think he was a rock and roller, I think.
rock and roller? Yeah. And he did you fit? Did you think you fit stuff? Because sometimes when you work with people, you can kind of there's a easy kind of mix or an easy kind of you kind of match each other's styles. You can work with each other. Did the two of you find it easy to work
Yeah,
together?
yeah,
It was a straightforward process.
yeah.
Yeah. And do you do you think that um do you think that it's would be possible for a kind of film? Do you think that the time period that you were in, the kind of music that was being made, and maybe what was being funded, I don't know. Do you think it's possible for something like that to come about again, or do you think that the time period that you created that in was kind of necessary for the music and the film?
I think it was of its time. Yeah, I think it
Yeah,
matched the zeitgeist, largely because of things like the folk rock revival at the time. I think it would be a different film. I think Robin Hardy had a go at making a follow-up called The Wicker Tree, which apparently is dreadful. I mean, I've never seen it, but I mean, and I've not really searched it out, but apparently it sort of has a. And also, remember, there was an attempt to. Nicolas Cage remade The Wicker Man.
yeah, that was appalling though.
I mean, which is horrendous.
Yeah, I mean, I could. It's so not loyal to like I don't even I haven't even rewatched it to be honest, but like it shouldn't be named the same name, I don't think.
Well, the thing is, it took everything. I mean, that thing about it's being a musical, because they probably spend more time singing and making music in The Wicker Man than they do in Oklahoma, for all I know. But I mean, it's just if you take the one thing out of the film that makes it quirky and interesting, which is the music,
Yeah,
you've got a not that interesting film, particularly, you know, rethink. It's just a. And it's all wrong anyway. The film is just sort of conceptually it's misconceived, as they
yeah.
say.
And when the music was being made and did were you coming at it from an angle of trying to make it creepy at all, or were you just trying to record the songs as best to your ability as you could?
There wasn't any real need. No, no. And if you made it creepy, it would completely destroy the whole idea of the film, wouldn't it? I
Yeah,
mean, in fact, it's the normality of it, which is actually the creepiest thing about it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.